What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Other Guys on the Badlands Podcast Network. I'm Jake Chatsky, joined, as always, by my co-host, Paul Kilgallen. Paul, we are 1 week away from Jets football. How you feeling?
I'm good, man. I said it I think to Will last week. Like I can't stand talking about it, reading about it, hearing about it anymore. Like it's 2 years of dry humping. Like we gotta go. Like let's see it. I was like there was a small part of me that was hoping for some Reddick news today. But I think like we kind of held off as long as we could here to recording just in case that was going to happen. But considering it's an off day, that's probably not coming. It's probably coming tomorrow if it's coming this week. And the other thing I want to get out in front of is that last year in our last pod, right before the season started, I went on this whole tangent about how curses aren't real and we have nothing to worry about, and all I have to do is go out and win games. So I feel like I can't get any worse than that in this year's last pod before the season. So let's get it rolling here.
Yeah, no jinxes coming this episode. But what we do want to do now that, because you're right, we're sick of talking about football. It's almost here. But we do have to level set with 1 week remaining going into the season. And we thought a good way to do that would just be for us to talk. Will did a great episode with Rich earlier this week about this, but we wanted to give our take on a couple of things and our expectations for the season, a little mini season preview week before the season. And so we've got, these will be things that we're expecting to see, some hot takes, kind of a mixed bag, but just something to do 1 week before kickoff, before we actually get the games played. And so with that, there was really only one place to start in my mind. And that's the question of, to you, Paul, what in your mind is the bar for success going into this season? Is it playoffs? Is it more than that? What are you thinking?
I mean, at a base level, it's more than that, right? Getting there and getting bounced immediately, especially if it's on the road, that's not good. I mean, we can't, as much as like they haven't made the playoffs in 13 years, and it would just be wonderful to win some games and like be in playoff contention and get to the playoffs and play on wild card weekend. Like as much as that's all true, we're all going to have a bad taste in our mouth if it's a road playoff game and they get bounced and they don't look great doing it. So at a base level, like just making the playoffs isn't good enough. So then I guess the question from there is like, well, what more do you need? And I think, I could go a couple different ways with it. Like number one, I want to win the division. I think that the division is vulnerable this year. Like it's kind of there for the tanking. The Bills are a little bit weaker than they were last year. Miami is a paper tiger. Like I say that over and over and over again. I'm not afraid of Miami, and New England is back in the basement where they belong. So it's not like we're dealing with Tom Brady anymore. We're not a lot of people are afraid of Josh Allen in that similar way. But like, again, the Bills are not that good. So I think I want the division for sure. And winning the division would at least allow me to we could at least take something out of the season, right? If it's just a playoff berth, like that doesn't really take a whole lot out of the season. But if we win the division, I feel like then we can take something home with us. But I think really when I get down to like the nitty gritty of like what makes this a success or not is like, is Aaron Rodgers playing another year? And if he's not, then like kind of need to win the Super Bowl this year to make that a success, right? So like if we're getting him for 2 more years, does it help to get a little bit of playoff experience, win a playoff game, win a division, maybe have a home playoff game and then go on the road for one or whatever it is, right? Okay, then I can like maybe get with that. So I guess to boil it down, what I'm getting at is if they're not going to win the Super Bowl, I at least want to win the division and get a home playoff game. I would love to get the 1 seed. But I think like at the end of the day, like this is a short window here, man. And, Stafford has been with the Rams for a couple of years. Brady played with the Bucks for a couple of years. Peyton played with the Broncos for a couple of years. Like we're talking max 2-3 year window here. So like, let's go win something. There's no moral victories here in getting to the playoffs. So like, let's actually go win something, win a division, win a conference, win a Super Bowl.
It's a good point. And I don't think coming into this conversation, I would have said success is only measured by winning a Super Bowl. I think for a franchise that hasn't made the playoffs in 13 years, that is quite a big leap. But when you do frame it in the context of the Rodgers window, like that is what you went out to get him for. So I concede your take there. I do think it's it'll be interesting, like if the Jets make the playoffs and by limping into a wild card spot and get smoked by the 2 seed in the first week, like even though Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas will be able to say like we made the playoffs, I don't know that that's enough to save their jobs. So I do think if you're a wild card team, you got to pull off an upset. If you've got, a home playoff game as a heavy favorite, hopefully you win that game because losing at home would fucking be embarrassing, especially if you've gone out and won the division. Like, I do think there's a world where the Jets win the division and still need to, like, you know, hold on to a playoff win for those guys to keep their jobs. So I do think it's more than just making the play. As weird as it's been, because I feel like any time in the last 5 years, making the playoffs would have been deemed a success. And now that we had a lost year with Rodgers, we don't necessarily know what the future holds. We need to not only make the playoffs, but I feel like see some playoff success to feel like we had a successful season. So I'm with you
Yeah,
there on it being more than just making the dance.
dude, it like the way you just said that, limping into the playoffs, it gave me like goosebumps a little bit. Like if we're limping into the playoffs, it's a failure unless they go on a run in the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. Like I can't if they don't have a playoff spot locked up by like week 16, call it, at least just getting in, right? And then maybe we're playing for the division the last 2 weeks, fine. But if we're like in the hunt graphic in week 17, it didn't work, right? Like we might have to tear it down and start over again. So yeah, no, I can't handle limping into the playoffs and then like having to struggle through a couple playoff wins. Like let's get there convincingly and then let's go on a run.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about Aaron Rodgers already this podcast. We're not going to do any Rodgers hot takes. I feel like everyone knows what we want to see out of that guy. So give me the guy besides Aaron Rodgers that you're most excited to watch this season.
Yeah, I'll give you one on offense and one on defense. And I'm sorry for being like corny about it. Like it's Garrett Wilson, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's what I had on offense.
yeah, exactly. It has to be Garrett Wilson, right? We're finally going to see him with competent quarterback play. And why don't I do this? Let me let you talk about Garrett Wilson. I'll say it for obvious reasons. That's why we want to see it. I think 1B on offense is probably Olu Fashanu. Like, just like we're probably not going to see him all that much, right? But this is probably the centerpiece of things on the offensive side moving forward. So, obviously Garrett Wilson is the centerpiece skill position, but like in terms of like the offensive unit and protecting it, it'll be exciting to see what he can do. And then on defense, God, I hate to say this, but like Hassan Reddick, I think I want to see Hassan. I want to see a premier edge rusher
It would be nice
yeah,
to see him physically in the building. That would
in
be
a uniform, wearing green, right? Like anything, right? But as good and as fun as Bryce Huff was the last couple of years, it always, I don't know, it just like it there was this feeling to it where you knew he was an undrafted guy, and like I don't know, for me at least, there was part of me that was kind of always waiting for the other shoe to drop with Bryce Huff. Not that I was like still getting surprised by him, but I was kind of always waiting for it to like evaporate a little bit. Even though you use your eyes, you could see the dude is good and he had a great speed rush. That undrafted feeling always kind of like it never felt as legit as Hassan Reddick might feel. Like when we have one of the most premier pass rushers in the NFL coming off the edge, I think that'll be fun to watch. So I'll go with those two guys, but floor
yeah.
is yours to talk about Garrett.
Garrett's the obvious one. He has back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons with absolute duds at the quarterback position. And obviously, like, third year in the NFL is a lot under your belt. The game really starts to slow down for a lot of players starting in year 3, and he's already been such a success. I think he could truly become that. Like right now, I think most people would classify him as like a tier 2 receiver. Like not Jets fans, but like if you're talking about the league holistically, people are like, yeah, he's a top 10 guy, not a top 5 guy. Like, I truly think that this season, with competent quarterback play, he could transcend to the Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, like tier one for multiple seasons, franchise cornerstone level receiver, where it's like not even a question. And putting him with competent quarterback play will be fantastic. You called out Olu, the other one that's an obvious one, but Brees Hall has been coming off an ACL surgery. Last year, he was one of the best running backs in the National Football League, and he was doing it behind a dog shit offensive line. So we've talked about Olu and whether the line can stay healthy. If the Jets are able to have this, because I can't name one player on the offensive line, it's kind of a group key piece. If the group is as good as we hope it is on paper, I'm excited to see what Brees Hall does running behind a line that's actually competent. So that's my 1B player on offense.
Yeah, I think with Brees, like the reason that he didn't come to mind first for me was just that with Brees, like we've already seen it. I
Right.
think what we're all looking forward to is now we're going to see it more. I think there's an element of Garrett Wilson that we have not seen yet. Like we just have not physically been able to get our eyes on it. And I wish that there was a way to handicap his statistical production based on the quarterback play he's had. Like, hey, 1,000 yards with Mike White, Joe Flacco, Zach Wilson, Trevor Simeon, Tim Boyle equals, 1,700 yards with a competent quarterback, right? Like, I wish there was a way to handicap what we have seen from him because there's an element of his game that we just have not seen yet. But you're right. Brees is going to explode also because now that there's a competent line and he's going to be getting fed the ball more, there's going to be respect for the pass game, which will open things up for him. So, yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be awesome. I was watching a college game over the weekend of a team I like, and the team I like is just kind of always a defensive team, and you're never confident that they're going to score. And I was talking to somebody, and I was like, "Man, I just want to know what it feels like to root for a football team that they just go out there on 3rd and 7, and they're going to convert it, or they need 7 late, and you just know they're going to get it right." Like, what does that feel like? I just want to know what it feels like so bad. And hopefully we can feel it a little bit this year.
All right, so we talked about stuff we're excited for. Now let's do the flip side of the coin. What's the thing you're most nervous about heading into this season?
So, injuries, I guess. I mean, I was about to say that we hadn't really seen any of that stud young group get hurt yet. But that's not entirely true. We saw Brees miss, 3/4 of a season with an ACL. So I think that's not entirely true. Sauce had a couple games with concussion. Garrett Wilson stayed mostly healthy. Every time Garrett Wilson touches the ball, the way he moves, that like kind of Gumby,
Yeah.
like quickness that he has, where he kind of holds the ball out wide sometimes and his whole body whips to the side. I'm always nervous something is going to happen with his knees or his ankles when he's doing that stuff. And so I'm not really at a position where I'm terrified that Aaron Rodgers is going to get hurt again. He's been like nicked up most of his career. He usually plays through it, barring any kind of like major injury, which I think would be so insanely unlucky to happen in back to back years. Like he's probably going to play most of the games and he's going to play through whatever bumps and bruises he has. I'm worried about what if something happens to Garrett Wilson, or what if we start to play Swiss cheese on the line again and we're starting to swap pieces and move people all over the place. Like if something happens early that sets the season off course and like we're not 5-1 after the first 6 and maybe we're 3-3 or we're 2-4 and we're struggling and we're scraping, like what happens at that point, and are they going to be able to recover? And is there a major injury that causes that to happen? And if there is, can they go out and replace it with a trade or something like that? So I don't know. What am I nervous about? Like, it's a tough question for me to answer. I'm nervous about the Jets jetsing. Like, I'm nervous about everything, right?
So
I'm nervous about literally everything.
so my